Standing on that ledge, you think you're gonna fly. If you take that long last step, we'll have to say goodbye. Whoa, whoa.
Hello, and welcome to Beating a Dead Horse. As always, I'm your host, Sean McKinda.
And I'm your host, Jackson Keller.
And this week, we're going to be talking about BlacKkKlansman. But before we do that, I want to talk about what we're doing next week. Just because I'm going to be talking about this several times throughout this episode, because it's a big thing that we're doing. And we'd love to have everyone who listens to this turn up for it.
And we got you trapped. It's at the very beginning. If you want to hear about Oscar Best Picture nominee BlacKkKlansman, you got to listen through our ad. So do it, Sean. Take it away.
It's only about 30 seconds. We promise it'll be short. We're going to be doing a actual live stream of the episode next week. And over at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we're going to spend an hour talking about Danganronpa. And then we're going to open it up to chat if anybody has any questions about, like, best girls or best boys or, hey, what do you think actually happened in that game? So I'm fucking psyched about this. I've finished this game actually live on stream. If you want to go back and watch some of those, I'm pretty sure most of the VODs of that are still up. Jackson hasn't played it yet, so I want to ask him some questions to tease the audience a little bit here, but I can't, and you're killing me.
What can I say? My natural inclination for playing games is to take a weekend, not leave the house, and just play them all in one sitting. But no, it's going to be great. You wanted the anime, we're bringing you the anime. You wanted the memes, we're bringing you the memes. You wanted waifus, we're bringing you waifus. We're bringing it all next week, so be there or be square.
Yep, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy. Please join us and ask us questions and tell us why we're wrong and things. I'm really excited to talk to more people directly while we're actually recording. It should be a great time. That being said, let's talk about BlacKkKlansman and, like, actually talk about, you know, the episode itself.
BlacKkKlansman. What a fine film. What an excellent film. And how fortunate for me that this movie got put up for Best Picture, and therefore we had an excuse to talk about it again.
It was on our list to talk about when it came out, but one of us had to leave the country for a month.
Yes, that is exactly what happened, and lo and behold, as soon as I leave the country, Hollywood's like, all right, now that schmuck's gone, we can stop releasing our shitty blockbusters and bring out the actual meat and potatoes of this industry. And so I missed both BlacKkKlansman and 8th Grade, but now I've seen them both, and we're here to talk about BlacKkKlansman because 8th Grade is not a movie you can talk about on a Deathcast, and this is up for Best Picture, and the stars have aligned. Perfect.
You should watch 8th Grade anyway, though. It's one of the best movies to come out last year.
Yes, I highly recommend doing so. And I also highly recommend BlacKkKlansman, which I think it's tragic that this doesn't have a chance in hell of winning Best Picture. Which is a shame because I think that this, after mulling it over a bit, this would probably be in my top 3 of 2018. I really like this movie a lot. It's really funny. It's really clever. It's got a lot of punch, got a lot of weight where it needs to. The performances are great. I mean, it's surprisingly, like, it's challenging, like, subject matter, obviously, but in terms of genre and form, it's surprisingly watchable and easy to digest. Like, it plays out very much like a 70s police thriller, like, just sort of recontextualized through kind of like being the black police officer and going on this undercover investigation. But stylistically, it reminds me a lot of the kind of cop movies that were coming out in the 70s. So really, like, if unless you're too much of like a stuck in your ways, like, racist, I think that the movie is really enjoyable and really entertaining on a surface level too. And
it's a lot. It's really funny. Like, that can't be understated. It's a very funny movie.
Yes, I laughed a lot. And granted, its sense of humor is very dark and very uncomfortable, but that's my bag. So I thought this movie was great.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely wonderful. And as Jackson says, it's really unfortunate that it's gonna lose to like Green Book, which this is the opposite. This is anti-Green Book in almost every way, because Green Book's all about, hey, racism is solved and we don't need to feel bad for that anymore. And this movie's like, hey, racism runs rampant. It's a constant problem and we need to fucking fix it.
The sins of the father are delivered upon the son for generations and generations.
Actually though.
Well, because it's funny. I mean, I guess I gotta save this for spoiler talk. But yeah, the movie, I guess in non-spoiler ways, the movie isn't afraid to really like lean on the fourth wall and take some quotes directly from like the Trump campaign and the Trump administration and really like mock the shit out of them in context.
Oh my god, there's a scene early on where one of them's talking to the other person like, you don't think someone would do something like that, do you? And then they basically both look into the camera.
It happens like 3 times where someone's like, come on now, Commissioner. America would never elect a guy like David Duke president. You're really naive, Ron. Both look directly at the camera.
Oh man, one of my favorite quotes about Spike Lee actually was really recent. Somebody was interviewing him and he asked him like, so you're on record as calling Trump a motherfucker, right? And he goes, yeah, although like, did you guys actually count? Because it was way more than just once. And it was great. And like, it comes through very clearly in this movie. We're going to talk a lot about like the themes and kind of like the way it plays off like motifs and scenes and like shot construction and terminology later on. In a way that will kind of sound like we're asking some interesting questions about it. And like, I feel like we should front load this by saying the movie is very much like racism fucking sucks. I'm on the side of, Black Lives Matter and everything like that. And like, I feel like if you listen to the podcast, you can, there's not a good way of saying it, but like, yes, we agree with that. We're not here to be like, no, actually, the other side's correct.
We haven't thrown our lot in with the alt-right.
Yeah, no, we're very much on the other side of this issue. So I just want to put that out there before we start talking about the themes, because we are going to kind of start discussing similar motifs between the way they present the KKK and the Black Panthers, which is not so much as saying of, well, maybe they're both wrong, very fine people on both sides. More of a conversation about how they've both been viewed, I think, more than anything. We'll dive into more detail later. It's a conversation both on like image and also I think just a little bit touching at like the core problem of basically why this shit hasn't been solved and probably never will going to be solved, in a very dark sort of like take on American race politics. Also, yeah. We're both very, very white. If you are new to the podcast, you should probably know that. So keep in mind, we're coming at this from a position of privilege. We want to talk about this movie just because we really like it, and I think it's an interesting thing to talk about from an outsider's perspective. But this is very much an outsider's perspective. Yeah, I guess as far as my attitude for this, like I'm not going to sit here and try and claim that this movie has the right or wrong idea on how to go about like implementing change or making reforms or revolutions or whatever, because that isn't my place to say. But what I do want to try and do is look at what's going on like in the text of the movie itself, and try and suss out like what it and by proxy the filmmaker are sort of wrestling with, and what sort of look at the complexities without making a value judgment on them, if that makes sense. So, like, I haven't actually said what I thought of the movie, but, like, in case it's not super clear at this point, I also really, really liked it. It's really, really well done. It's very funny. Everyone acts their asses off in it, and it's so good. Adam Driver deserves, like, multiple awards for being able to go from his character in this to Kylo Ren in Star Wars, and both played absolutely believably and wonderfully. So like he should be fucking lauded for that. And everyone else is just wonderful in this movie.
I have an anecdote about Adam Driver in this movie because I watched this with Haley, my lovely girlfriend, and when I stood up to grab our dinner at one point, and so we were talking about what we had seen up until that point a little bit, and she asked me like who the guy who was the main white cop was, because she said he looked very familiar. And I just said, that's Kylo Ren. And she's like, really? And she like kind of looks at the screen and squints while it's paused and is like, oh my God, you're right. Wow, he's a really talented actor. Those are both completely different characters. And like, he looks like a real man and not a child. So
he's not
props
a piss
to Kylo
baby.
Ren. Props to Adam Driver.
Yeah. So like that's the big thing, is just like this movie is really good in almost every way. I'm struggling to think of really any sort of complaint I actually have with it. Anything that could be construed as a complaint, I think, is more of a question of theming and whatnot. And as we keep saying, we're going to get to that. We put themes behind spoilers basically whenever we can, because what else are we going to do with that? I don't know, man. You got anything you really want to talk about before we get into spoilers? Like compliments that you can give it?
Okay. So this isn't very spoilery. But if I'm giving more praise and I'm giving more compliments, one thing that I really, really like about this movie is how it presents the Klan itself, because I wasn't sure. I heard that this was kind of a like police dramedy coming in, but I didn't really know much about the movie and the premise aside from the title. And so I was wondering if this would be kind of like a Tarantino style like exploitation over the top sort of thing. I should have known better because Spike Lee has criticized Tarantino on many occasions, but obviously it's not that. It's a lot more like character driven comedy and a lot more like a standard police procedural. But all that's to say that I was expecting some like fun, like crazy over the top villainy. But what's really hilarious is that the way that the Klan is presented is both funnier and more realistic, because it so accurately portrays the reality of being like a shitty middle-class white guy who's part of some dumb like bro group, except this bro group happens to be the Ku Klux Klan, and they have like membership
Whoops,
cards.
It's the KKK.
They have like, there's a whole to-do about getting his membership card sent.
Oops, all racists.
There's and they're just like, yeah, so we'll have our next chapter meeting at Donald's house just so we can enjoy his wife's lovely pies. And like the wife comes in like all smiling and like, oh, you know, all the other boys are in the living room, and then like talks about how she wants to kill the Jewish conspiracy and starts spewing like Alex Jones alt-right shit. And so the mundanity of evil is on full display.
And honestly, the starkness from which you just went from mundanity to killing the Jewish conspiracy shocked me in podcast. It plays in the exact same way in the movie. Like, it plays very well.
It's literally what they do. They talk about like scheduling, like, yeah, we'll go golfing at like 3 p.m. and then like topple the evil degenerate like corruption seeping through America the hour after. Like like completely straight face, completely deadpan. Like there are some of the more like caricatured like redneck types, especially like the main crazy bad guy. But like you kind of need that in this kind of movie, otherwise there is no plot to foil, because the premise sort of hinges on them stopping the KKK from doing actual harm.
And so many of them are just banal racists.
Yeah, and
that's a weird thing to say, but like,
but it's an important thing to say, because it's the sort of thing that hammers home, is that I feel like when you talk about the Klan nowadays in a lot of media, especially media made by white people, is that the Klan are presented in, again, sort of the Tarantino-esque over-the-top villain fashion. But here, the picture,
which honestly might be more detrimental. Like, I imagine that's probably part of where Spike Lee comes from in his criticisms of Tarantino's perspective of the KKK, where, like, when they seem like true supervillains, like, you forget that racism is a very banal thing for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's that totally is, like, that's sort of the problem currently happening with sort of the proliferation of the alt-right now, like, to use a relevant talking point, is that because of, like, Nazis and Klansmen...
Looks directly into camera.
Looks directly into the camera. But because, like, the media has this very particular sort of cartoon character image of what being a Nazi or a Klansman means,
when they're fashionable and the millennial alt-right...
I mean, precisely. That's when you get, like, Richard Spencer, who's over here literally, like, proclaiming a desire to create a white ethno-state, and people saying that you're being too hard on him for calling him a Nazi, even though that's just the only reason he disagrees with that assessment is that Nazi is bad PR now. So yeah, I think
he's all like dressed to the nines, and he looks like a perfectly healthy young white Nazi. I mean, not Nazi.
He's a provocateur.
Yes, of course. The trolls from the 4chan days, my friends.
Oh God. So yeah, that's great.
It's also super tense in a lot of places, and, like, it manages to be tense and funny at the same time. It's a fucking masterpiece in filmmaking in a lot of ways.
It is both very hilarious, and yet all the moments that are supposed to be dramatic, all the moments that are supposed to be tense, more, again, like a typical police thriller, all really land. This like you say, I don't think I can really find much fault in the filmmaking itself. And really, I think if you are going to have a problem with this movie, like several people who have criticized it, it is more about whether or not you kind of see eye to eye with where the movie seems to stand on the issues of how to go about bringing about change and shit. So,
all right, you want to talk spoilers?
Let's get into spoilers and remind our wonderful audience that we have a special thing going on.
Yeah, we're going to be kind of changing up a lot of things right now. So first and foremost, you're going to start hearing what's coming up next week in our pre-spoiler discussion, just because we realize that if anybody isn't interested in getting into the spoiler side of things, you might not know what we're talking about next week. So first announcement, that's happening here. So stick around for our announcement of what we're doing next week right now. Which, once again, we're doing a live stream over at twitch.tv/helpus_Skippy talking about the first Danganronpa, Trigger Happy Havoc. Please come listen, come talk to us about everything that we are wrong about in that video, because I'm sure it's going to be a lot of things. Y'all are going to have opinions and we want to hear them. So please come back for that. Other than that, let's talk spoilers. Let's dive into the meat and potatoes. Let's talk themes and parallels and cinematic motifs, because they're there, baby. I don't know, this has gotten away from me, but I'm still talking, and here we go, Jackson.
Don't worry, Sean, I'll save you. So, like so many other films, I'm gonna make a statement that I don't think is too unreasonable. I think that BlacKkKlansman is a movie that at its heart is actually about Hollywood. And we're kind of jumping off the discussion of the KKK being presented as, like, just some dweebs in, like, an after-school boys club. David Duke is in this movie.
Played by Topher Grace, and it's wonderful.
It's hilarious. A lot of the funniest scenes in the movie are Ron, our main man, talking to David Duke over the phone and pretending to be white, and just the fact that David Duke is presented as such a complete idiot and like someone who such a blowhard and just like this mealy mouth little shit. It's great, and so they milk that situational comedy for all it's worth, but really, the scenes with David Duke also bring up some of the interesting, more controversial elements of the movie, perhaps. So, Sean, why don't you tell me what you noticed about this scene? Because this is your second viewing.
Yeah. So the big thing with the David Duke and Ron Stallworth scenes are more on how they are set up and staged. If you watch the movie, you might notice that both of their shots are at a Dutch angle, but opposing Dutch angles. So like Ron is tilted 45 degrees to the left and David Duke is tilted 45 degrees to the right, giving like conflicting worldviews. Like it's a literal clash of worldviews. The part that I think is most interesting about this setup, however, is that the characters are positioned leaning back in their chairs in such a way that they are upright in these crooked worlds. Which is interesting that you position David Duke, you know, a loathsome human being, as literally upstanding in this crooked world. Like, that is a very easy read from the setup of this shot. And it's, you know, they then mirror that for Ron's character in the exact same way, where he is upstanding in this crooked world. And it's such a weird comparison to put your protagonist and your antagonist both in this position. And like the easy answer here, once again, is just like they're both upstanding in a world that is crooked. David Duke views his morals as the correct way to look at the world. Ron Stallworth views his in the same way. But once again, that puts Ron Stallworth in the same category as David Duke, implying that one of them theoretically could be having the wrong ideas. And if you're trying to put that against David Duke in a true-to-life story, it's a wild statement.
So there's this scene, and then there's also another scene where Adam Driver's character is undercover at his initiation, at Ron's initiation, rather, in the KKK. And this is contrasted with a speaker gathered around the black protesters from earlier in the movie, telling a story about horrific police brutality and making a speech about Black Power. And so these scenes are also very, very much mirrored. And I had a very interesting reaction to this scene because, like, there's a lot of emphasis put on like similar words being used, like power, fighting an enemy, like securing the future, like those sort of sentiments. It's very similar rhetoric back to back. And so and obviously there's like some match cuts of like the Klansmen doing the salute and the protesters raising their fists in solidarity. And again, kind of halfway through the movie, I ended up pausing just to grab food, and it was right after this scene, and Haley had said something to me like, wow, like a scene like this really like shows you the difference of who is right in this scenario, and like what the difference is between the sentiments of like white power and black power. And I thought about that because I was thinking, yeah, I understand the difference, but if I didn't know who made this movie, even though it's very obviously anti-racism, I might think a little bit that it is drawing that kind of false equivalency between like the Klan and the Black Panthers.
I think I'm going to jump in just really quick because we had talked about this a little bit in our pre-discussion, but this is something that just kind of came to me as you were talking, so I apologize. But when you mention Haley referring to the scene as having a very, you know, clear rhetoric, I think she's right, because the Klan speaks in a very hateful way, and like it's a very banal way, but it's also clearly a hateful way, whereas the Black Panthers listening to the gentleman whose name I am totally blanking on, and I feel terrible about it. I'm sure this gentleman was actually the gentleman who experienced this, and I'm going to look it up as soon as I finish talking so we can refer to him by the correct name after this. But in this moment, while the conversations are wildly different, I think more than anything, it's just the scene, as you said, the match cuts that really kind of drive home a similar style of meeting. I think like she's right in that the rhetoric is very different, but the styling of the editing and the shot construction implies a similar ideology in terms of where they feel they are in the world more than anything, because they both feel that they are becoming the oppressed. It's just the language itself that separates them.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Although I don't know. You're right that the tone is definitely very different, and that the Klan rhetoric is a lot more hateful and aggressive. But as far as like the rhetoric itself, I still can't shake this feeling that they're being presented as ultimately at least sharing some similarities of this idea of like being oppressed and rising up and being alone and like the last beacon against an overwhelming force.
Quick aside, there is a gentleman in this movie who looks so much like Steve Buscemi, and I was making jokes about how this dude just wants to be Steve Buscemi. It's Michael Buscemi. I'm pretty sure it's his brother.
We were wondering if that was Steve Buscemi, actually.
No, I'm pretty sure it's his brother.
Oh, wonderful. So yeah, I guess like with that though, what's going on here? Like why these sort of comparisons to David Duke? And I want to come back to my statement that this is a movie that's actually about Hollywood, because it's something that's made very explicit in the speech given to the protesters, where again, another real like kind of look directly at the camera moment where he says, there was this movie, Birth of a Nation, that everyone went to see, that I went to see, and that presented me as like some force of darkness, like ruining the white man's world.
For what's worth, the character you're referring to is Jerome Turner, played by Harry Belafonte.
Yes, thank you. And so he, and then he keeps kind of going and saying that, we call those kind of movies blockbusters nowadays, and that's the real like turn to the camera moment. And between that and just the intro of the movie being a similarly like shot through a very clear film lens of Alec Baldwin forming like a Klan propaganda video, basically. And there's clearly a focus on cinema in a movie that seemingly doesn't have that much to do with cinema on the surface, because it also pops up when Ron is talking to Patrice. That's her name, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so Patrice, the leader of the Black Student Union, and she is making all these criticisms of movies, and they're kind of having a bit of like a friendly banter about it, and Ron's kind of goes like, like you're taking it too seriously, they're just movies. And again, it was another moment that felt sort of weird to me, of like, this scene feels a little strangely dismissive of her. And so what ends up happening just through the course of the movie is that we get this issue of Ron wanting to be in a relationship with Patrice and wanting to contribute to this Black Power movement, while also hiding the fact that he is a police officer, that he is the enemy, but he feels like he can do some good by reforming from the inside. And throughout the movie, there's a couple of conversations about whether or not that sort of internal reform is possible. And from those conversations and just the overly like self-referential nature of being about film and having all these moments that point to film, it's hard not to see the parallels with Spike Lee's position, who is a very renowned filmmaker who's been working in the industry for a long time, very respected, and whose movies, overwhelmingly are about trying to make movies about these ideas of Black power and anti-racism, but still being part of another kind of system, this entertainment like apparatus that is Hollywood, that in its own way contributes to these ideas of white supremacy, and sort of the awkward position that that puts Spike Lee in. And I think that it's also no accident that because this is another thing that came up just sort of during me and Haley's casual conversations, is that she had mentioned we were both kind of having a laugh because she was like, well, why are they sending Adam Driver, who is going to get this suspicion about maybe looking kind of Jewish? Send Jimmy, send the old white guy. They're not going to question him. And we both had a little laugh about it. And but I think having a character who is Jewish be the character that sort of infiltrates, and again, with his relationship and Ron's, there's a big conversation about this also being his fight, even though he can pass and not having any attachment to his Jewish identity or whatever. But that's what they keep. The other thing that they keep saying, not only are the Klan racist, but also anti-Semitic, and that lives on even today in the sort of conspiracies that the Alex Jones types push, that Hollywood is, controlled by the Jews and they control everything, we're all just pawns in their game, like we can't trust them. Everyone in Hollywood's Jewish and that's why they're evil and pushing their ideology.
The correct term is global elite.
You're right. Because I'm cutting through the euphemism because that is the euphemism they use now, global elite. Mm-hmm. So I think it's no accident that they send that character instead of the old, maybe more Klan-like looking guy, just so they can make that comparison.
Michael
Buscemi. Michael Buscemi. And it just makes for some good drama when the crazy guy starts like pulling Adam Driver into
asking to see his dick.
Asking to see his dick. Yeah, ask him to see if he's circumcised. Circumstanced. Oh God, one of my favorite things about this movie is like how everyone like compliments Ron Stallworth, who is actually Adam Driver's character, pretending to be Ron Stallworth for his like being an upstanding like Klansman, when Adam Driver's delivery of every line every time he has to say some sort of slur sounds like so half-hearted and like awkward. Like, yeah, I hate them. I sure do. I wish I could kill one sometime. And it's hilarious, but yeah, so it just creates this, and from there, I think that with these ideas of like being in the system, of being an agent of the system, and being perhaps sympathetic to that agent of the system as either our protagonist to sort of root for and follow throughout the movie, or as the filmmaker, like putting that into his protagonist.
Yeah, actually, that's really interesting the way because I feel like in our pre-discussion, I wasn't necessarily sure what you were getting at, but I feel like when you recontextualize some of this and like refer to the police as more of the Hollywood system, and you put Spike Lee in position of Ron Stallworth, infiltrating the Hollywood system as a black man to make movies that are more representative of him, you get flack from both sides, because like that was the other thing I was mentioning is like there are a ton of parallels between the Black Panthers and the KKK as well, just in terms of like the vernacular they use. They are constantly referring to specifically the police as pigs, which if you take that and make it a Hollywood metaphor, it suddenly becomes, both the black populace and the KKK are looking at Hollywood as doing things that are not indicative of what they would like the world to be. And, the Black Panthers are pushing for a more inclusive Hollywood that's more representative of more people other than just us whites. And you've got the KKK who are saying this inclusivity is bad. We just want whites, get the pigs out of here, or, the global elite, if you would. So that's interesting, actually. That's really kind of cool coded language.
Yeah, and so I think, like, if we're thinking about this as a discussion about Hollywood, like, I like what you just said about that sort of neither side of this debate being satisfied. Because if you take a look at something like the new Star Wars movies, on the one hand, you have the alt-right who are saying, how dare you...
Shopping up $2,000 of fucking... what's the character name?
Was it Rey or was it Finn?
Rose.
Oh, of course it was.
Yeah, chopping up like $2,000 of Rose because they're mad at her for being a character. So on one side you have that, and sure, like, there are a lot of people who do appreciate like Finn and Rey being some of the most prominent characters in the new trilogy, but then also there are the argument that the sort of representation that those characters, Finn in particular, there's been a lot of criticism about being kind of like a bumbling idiot who makes like Black people look weak and needing other people to be heroes for them. And so even though, like, the actual contents of the argument aren't the same, it still produces, kind of as you were saying, that same sort of divide where you have these two different groups taking ire with a particular system, and then someone within that system seeing themselves as someone that can do good. And I think, like, one of the most heartbreaking lines in the movie to me, like, after, because I started thinking about this, try to think about the film sort of metaphor from the beginning, because whenever you see, like, a camera recording in a movie, that's one of the first signs that this is going to be a movie about movies in some way. Was there a camera recording in this?
With the way the Alec Baldwin stuff was filmed.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and then so at the end of the movie, when Patrice is like joking around with Ron, saying like, "Hey, have you turned in your resignation to the KKK? How about the police?" And he says that he's not going to resign from the police because he feels like he can do some good. And not only that, but he's wanted to be a policeman forever. Like, that was always his dream. And so given all of that, and given, I want to say that the movie, if the movie is perhaps a little wishy-washy in terms of its politics, and despite the fact that it is in some ways, like, very striking and very radical, like, we haven't even talked about the most, like, brutal death in the movie, which is the actual clips of the alt-right, like, Unite the Right
Charlottesville rally.
Yeah, and so we see the car running into people, and they place it at the end, and it's a real, even though it ends on this ominous note of the cross burning and, like, the continuation of racism living on despite a temporary victory being won, then we just cut immediately to Donald Trump saying his dumb bullshit. We cut to the idiots with the tiki torches chanting blood and soil, and then we see the news clip of the car, like, plowing into the crowd.
I think we even see, like, cell phone footage of that.
Yeah, it's real. So in a lot of ways, the movie is real confrontational and real difficult to watch. But in other ways, like, that's sort of the criticism, is that, is the movie trying to do a hashtag both sides thing? And you know what? I can't comment on whether or not that's ultimately what the movie amounts to. Like, who am I to say that? But I will just say that looking at this movie as, like, a personal statement by a filmmaker, I'm real sympathetic to Spike Lee and his position of being someone who's very passionate about art, like a particular art form, and, especially movies being very, by nature, very expensive and big budget and sort of tied into this racist capitalist system. I'm very sympathetic to what that idea that this is something, these issues about whether or not he's doing enough or making a difference are actually amounting to anything, or if his time would be better spent like organizing people in the community, like taking to the streets and protest. And you can see that, like, you know, just from, you know, Spike Lee's got a very particular sort of public profile. Like, he's very vocally critical of a lot of the shit that Hollywood gets up to. But I think it's something that, and not to be too much of a, like, oh man, there's only one race, the human race, her. But so not to be too universalizing, but I think in one way or another, it's the sort of impulse that any artist of popular media ends up wrestling with or thinking about if they have even one like iota of moral consideration, because that's the horrifying way that capitalism works. Even if you are making
no ethical consumption under capitalism.
Precisely. And like, if you are making like a movie and you need all these computers and stuff to do the special effects, what about the people exploited in the sweatshops building the computers? What about all this other stuff? Yeah, and so it's something that again, not what is the I don't know if the movie is. The movie's certainly not trying to say hashtag both sides are just as bad.
No. I think like the best way we can say this is that we are too far removed to be able to make a truly informed statement about like the movie's race politics. I would say that it absolutely comes down on the side of the Black Panthers. If it didn't, I would say that they wouldn't have let that whole Kwame Ture speech in the movie or the ending speech from Harry Belafonte. Like, if it was saying maybe the KKK is right, there's no way those would have gotten in. That said, what we can talk about is how the movie has parallels to Hollywood as two white dudes. Like, this is what we are far more equipped to compare to, is not so much the overarching race elements of it, but more the parallels to art and artists, as Jackson's a novelist looking to do that sort of art. And, you know, I do writing of my own, but more of a critical nature, which is, I would argue, absolutely a form of art. So, like, those are the questions that, when you get involved in this type of stuff, is the things that you have to ask yourself. Like, I criticize movies. Why? Who cares? It's a fucking stupid thing, but I like doing it. So, should I feel bad about it?
And this is just like, I think it's a crisis that's, again, not just all artists, but just a lot of people in general. Like, if you give something too much thought, like, you eventually come across that impasse of having to choose between something that personally makes you happy and something that may or may not contribute to something terrible. And, you know, so with the movie, and this is why I think, like, as far as the movies, like, what I would say, like, the movie's outlook is, it's more like wrestling with these issues, and I don't think it comes to an easy answer, because, you know, we leave on a very ambiguous note of not Ron and Patrice, like, reconciling their differences and, like, finding a middle ground. The note we leave on is, well, I'm sorry, I can't be in a relationship with you because your ideology is fundamentally goes against my own.
Oh, and also racism is still here. It all sucks. It's all bad.
It's pretty dark, pretty cynical. But also, yeah. So I think just being like, we're watching someone wrestle with how much is enough, and when can you go farther, and can you even draw a line? Is, if you can have any sort of small victory, is that something to be proud of, or should you just always aspire for something even greater? And the movie doesn't fucking know, because I think that question's impossible to answer.
Do you fucking know? I don't fucking know, man. I don't got an answer for you.
and that's why being alive is a nightmare.
There's your morbidity. Don't worry. We always come back around to it.
when we bring the real shit, we bring the real shit.
Yeah. No, this. Oh man, that's the problem with having a podcast that's like explicitly about death. We don't shy away from just being like, "Hey, it's all a fucking nightmare." And like, honest to God, if you're listening to this, that's probably what you should be expecting. Like, we're not gonna fucking. Well, I was happy at this moment. Were you happy here?
It's funny that you mentioned that, actually, because I was happy in the movie when, one of the best scenes is when they're all huddled around the phone and Ron gets his final fuck you on David Duke, and they're all sort of like
So
giggling
good.
and really, really bonding with each other. And you can see that, like, there's a genuine sense of camaraderie there, because who doesn't love roasting a fuckwad like David Duke? But then again, that's why we get that hard cut between that moment of camaraderie to the burning cross zooming in on the Klansman's hood at the end. Like, even though there might be some joy to be had in this world, there's still great darkness out there.
I mean, that scene too, I think, is why this movie came under a lot of flack from other people like Boots Riley, who were just like this kind of middle ground shit. That sounds harsh, but like I feel like from a perspective of someone like Boots, this is kind of like just middle ground bullshit. Like, you're not actually taking a hard stance on things. Where like you're like, hey, the cops are still friendly, and look at this buddy stuff. Is not great an outlook for us. And I think that kind of plays right into Spike Lee if you read it in the way that Jackson and I are reading it in, where, you're asking the questions of, are you doing enough? Is this okay? And I think having Boots ask him that is just the theme of the movie.
Yeah, I mean, because what we're really watching in real time, in reality, is the conflict between Ron and Patrice playing out in real life over Twitter over this movie, basically.
Yep.
With Boots as Patrice and Spike Lee as Ron. And
which, if you want to double marathon a movie, this and Sorry to Bother You would be a wild ride.
No, that would be interesting, because Sorry to Bother You is definitely a lot more fuck you, burn it all down in its attitude. And that's one of the things I
really in general.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I really loved about that movie. So honestly, I think that would be a very satisfying double feature.
Oh yeah, it would be two similar but dissimilar perspectives, really one two after another, and I think it'd be well worth watching. I want to watch Sorry to Bother You again. I need to do that.
Yeah, that movie is fucking great.
Yeah, that was a wonderful fucking movie. Understandable why it's not up for the Oscars, but it should have been.
If there were any justice in the world, that would be up for an Oscar. But it's weird. I guess, like, since we're talking about the Oscars, is it just me, or like is the selection of Best Picture nominees particularly weak this year? And even though there were a lot of great movies that came out last year,
I don't know if I would go with weak as much as I would go with weird, because like, I haven't seen Roma, full disclosure, but I've heard nothing but absolutely wonderful things about it. So like I'm more than willing to say that that's absolutely worthy of a Best Picture nomination, despite not seeing it. BlacKkKlansman I think is definitely worthy of it, just because like what Hollywood needs more representation, and this movie is a fucking wonderful example of that. Black Panther, I think I'm actually kind of okay with being nominated, just because I feel like the Oscars do kind of miss the cultural zeitgeist a lot. That said, there are 3 movies I haven't mentioned yet that can absolutely fuck right off and be replaced with something better. So, fuck Green Book, fuck A Star Is Born, and fuck Bohemian Rhapsody. Bryan Singer should be in jail.
Oh,
but I mean, like, I think those 3 though are at least Black Panther, Roma, and BlacKkKlansman are worth keeping on for one reason or another.
Yes. I think there's a reason. I think that's that's true as well. But I don't know. I guess I'd have to compare it to previous years because I feel like there is more just from the reaction, because I haven't seen most of these movies, but from what I've seen is that last year there were a lot of people like hyped about particular movies, and now this year it's like, well, BlacKkKlansman's not going to win, so hopefully the Academy gets over their stupid foreign language bias and picks Roma, otherwise this is a wash. So I don't know.
I mean, the other thing too is that the Oscars are just a giant shit show this year because nobody's hosting them.
That's true. I mean, it's kind of amazing that.
Oh my God, you're not on Twitter anymore. Did you see what they're putting in the commercial breaks?
Oh, I heard something about this. Remind me.
They have officially put like cinematography, I think filmmaking, best short story, and like hair and makeup in the commercials.
Oh yeah, I forgot. No, I did see that. Yeah, what an absolute disrespect.
That's
Holy shit.
absurd. I would be livid if I was in any of those categories.
I know,
especially because cinematography's fucking good.
Cinematography's pretty damn important.
And there were a lot of really good cinematography this year.
Well,
Is
I guess
for that. What are the cinematography ones actually? I'm gonna look this up really quick.
I'm interested to know that too, because my usual instinct is just look at the best picture ones and then wait until the conversation develops, because I'm not that invested.
Yeah. All right. What do we got? 2019. Oh, 2018. Duh. Is Cold War, The Favorite, Never Look Away, Roma, and A Star Is Born. Interesting.
Huh. Well, I did not see any of those, although I hope to watch Roma before the show, so...
Blade Runner 2049 won last year, so I'm cool with that. That was a great fucking movie.
That was an excellent movie. That was especially in the visuals.
Yeah, the visuals were absolutely stunning. This is obviously kind of in light of the Oscars coming up. Any final thoughts on them? Like, what are you thinking about?
On the Oscars, it's hard to feel super invested, since I haven't seen that many of the nominees. I think the only ones that I have seen as of now are BlacKkKlansman and Black Panther. And for me, like, I know that BlacKkKlansman doesn't have a chance, even though I think it absolutely deserves a chance. So kind of no fun in rooting for like something that isn't going to win. And then Black Panther, I see why it was nominated, and I see the merits in nominating it, but I just can't get over the Marvel-ness of it. Oh,
the final third. Like, the first two thirds are so good, and then the final third is so Marvel.
Yeah, it's like that's a case where that movie, if it had been like if Ryan Coogler and everyone else weren't under the oppressive grip of the Marvel machine, like, they could have made something really, really great and really special. And as it is, they made something that was pretty good. So it's hard for me to really get invested in Black Panther either, even though, like, in theory, like a diverse comic book movie, like, I should be excited about that. But
as I said, I'm just happy it got nominated more than anything. I agree that I don't think it's like super exciting or super worthy of like a win, but I think the nomination is really important and should hopefully lead to more good movies like that. And maybe Marvel will start to tone down the Marvel of the Marvel.
I think that's fair. And I will say that if there is a Marvel movie that deserves a nod, it is certainly that one. Like, I've seen a lot of people say, oh man, this isn't even the best Marvel movie that was released this year. They should have nominated Infinity War. And I'm just like, no, absolutely not.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm fucking Infinity War. Like, it was a fine enough movie. There were a couple storylines in there that I really liked. But overall, it was way too much of a movie, and they marveled it at the end quite marvelly.
Oh God.
Yeah, no. So that's where we are. We might be doing something with the Oscars after it comes out. We'll see. We've got a couple ideas around that time, I think. So keep your eyes peeled. We might be talking about best movie winner or previous Best Movie winners. I don't know what the plan is yet.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll at least, if at minimum, we'll at least have a little segment at the end of whatever we end up doing that week to discuss how the results kind of shook out.
Maybe instead we'll talk about Alita. That movie looks like a train wreck. I am kind of excited to see Alita. I'm not going to lie. I think she looks like a horrifying monstrosity, but it looks like just so much happening, and I'm kind of wildly interested.
The absolute definition of Uncanny Valley.
Oh, God. Yeah, if you look it up, like, that is just the picture next to the definition of Uncanny Valley.
I'll tell you what, though. I'll go see any damn anime movie so long as I one day get another shot at Dragon Ball.
Oh, that'd be a fun one to do for the podcast.
Oh, I would never. It'd be great because I'd get the experience of going to Dragon Ball Evolution in the theaters because I wasn't a Dragon Ball fan when that came out. But now I'd get to be disappointed in real time if they did that.
Yay! I've been Sean McKinda. You can find me on Twitter at Sean_McKinda. I'm also got a website, isortof.com. You can go check that out. I got stuff I post there sometimes. I haven't posted there recently, but like it shows you where you can find my Twitch page at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy, where we're going to be streaming next week at 9 p.m. on Tuesday, January 19th with a Danganronpa stream, just to let you know.
And I'm Jackson Keller. You can find me on that Danganronpa stream at 9 p.m. on Tuesday at helpless_Skippy Twitch, because I keep promising that I'm up to things, and I am, I swear. But it's been a slow burn. We've hit some roadblocks, so just continue to be hype, please.
Projects take time. Just patience. They're good, I promise. If you would like to get in contact with Jackson, you can tweet at the podcast at BADH_cast. I run that, so I will see it and I will relay all messages to him, or at least most messages. If you're just like, hey, fuck Jackson, I might relay that to him anyway because that sounds funny, but, you know.
I'm pretty, honestly, I've mentioned this before, but the thought of Sean being the arbiter of what I do and do not see in terms of feedback is both exciting and horrifying.
He only knows the good, don't worry. Other than that, though, thanks to Lords of the Highway for the use of our theme song. It is Suicide Alternate Take off the album High Octane, Low Expectations. As always, please go check them out. They've got new music. They're a wonderful band. They do some great stuff. Go listen to them. And thanks to 25 Years Later Site.com for hosting our podcast. They're in the midst of their Return to Twin Peaks month, where they're focusing a lot on Twin Peaks material and stuff like that. So if you like Twin Peaks, go check that out. But they also have a bunch of other stuff. They talk a lot about horror movies and cult classics and just new things that are coming out in cinema and whatnot. So please go read their articles and stuff. They're a bunch of really talented people. Next week, wow, hey, look at that. We're going to be talking about Danganronpa over at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time.
What was that, Sean? What did you say? Did you say that we're going to be talking about Danganronpa over at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time?
I did say that next week, Tuesday, February 19th, we'll be talking about Danganronpa Trigger Happy Havoc over at twitch.tv/helpless_Skippy at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You should be there. We're going to have a Q&A session. Ask us questions.
Be there or be doing something else. I can't really tell you how to live your life.
Bye.
Don't you go into the ground. Don't you go